This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, everybody. So once again, as we are getting ready for Rosh Hashanah, which will be in under 2 weeks, actually, 2 weeks from last Monday night. So I wanted to go over some of the different concepts and try to, as I said, to unravel the idea of the judgment on Rosh Hashanah. There are many teachings, and if we take them at face value without a proper understanding, many of them seem to be contradicted not only by other statements, of the sages, but what we see with our own eyes. So it behooves us to gain a better understanding and to be able to go into Rosh Hashanah fortified by that knowledge. So let us begin with source number one, which is, as we could have imagined, from the Talmud Bavli, the tractate that deals with and is titled Rosh Hashanah, and it's on Daf 16a. And the Mishnah there says, Ba'arba'a prakim ha'olam nidon. There are 4 junctures where the world is judged. The Pesach, it's judged al ha'tvua. I think we mentioned this last week also in a different context. Ba'atzeret on tvua, meaning the produce and the harvest. Ba'atzeret shavua time. We're judged al pero ta'ilan, and of course it doesn't mean that the produce is judged, doesn't mean the fruits of the trees are judged. It means that we are judged in terms of the produce, the harvest, the fruits of the trees that will be available to us. But Rosh Hashanah, on Rosh Hashanah, called Ba'ei Olam, all those who have come to the world. Yeah, the English says all the inhabitants of the world. I think the actual Hebrew translation is a little bit more emphatic. All those who have come to the world. We all come to the world for a period of time. All those come to the world over in Lefanav, pass before him, before God. Kibnei Maron. We spend, let's say, simply like the sheep that are going out of a pen, and a small opening is opened up, and they go out one at a time. Shenem, as it says, Hayotzer Yachad Libam Hamevin El Kol Ma'asehem. The one who understands, who created their hearts, understands all of their actions. And fourth, Uvechag on Sukkot, Nidonin al Hamayim. There's the judgment on the water that will be during the course of that year. And that is why, of course, on Sukkot, we have all of these water-related, water-dependent mitzvot, be it the lulav, etrog, hadassim, and aravos, be it the sukkah itself, where the schach has to be from that which grows from the ground. But of course, our focus today and the focus of the tractate of Rosh Hashanah is on the Rosh Hashanah of mankind that we discussed last week, as at the time of the creation of man, the recreation of man. But now we're focusing not so much on the essence, on the events of the day, but rather on the essence of the day, and that being a Yom Hadin, a day of judgment. And in source number 2, the Gemara teaches the famous saying, Amrav Krispedai, Amrav Yochanan, Shlosha Sfarim Nichtavim B'Rosh Hashanah. 3 books are opened up on Rosh Hashanah. Echad, one shall Rishaim Gemurin, one of totally evil people. The Echad shall Tzadikim Gemurin, one of totally righteous people. The Echad shall Beinoniyim, and the other is of those in the middle. Tzadikim Gemurin, those who are fully righteous. Nechtavim v'nechtavim la'alter, they are immediately written and sealed. L'chaim, for life. Rishaim Gemurin, those who are completely evil. Nechtavim v'nechtamim la'alter lamita, are immediately inscribed and sealed for death. Beinoniyim, those in the middle. Tluyin v'omdin, they are suspended. And until from Rosh Hashana, Va'ad Yom Kippur, until Yom Kippur. Zachu, if they merit, Nechtavim L'chaim, they're inscribed for life. Lo Zachu, if not, Nechtavim L'mita, they're inscribed for death. Now, if we take this Gemara at face value, in a way it's easier. We'll soon see how Rashi does not explain it the way we'd like to explain it. Meaning, I'm very comfortable, right? We all view ourselves as Beinoniyim, as in the middle, because none of us is completely evil, and with the exception of all of you, none of us is completely righteous. So therefore, we're all somewhere towards the middle of these Beinoniyim, right? Because the term that Rav Kruspedai, Rav Yochanan used is Rishayim Gemurin, totally evil and completely righteous. However, right, and of course we hear the echoes of our tefillot, the prayers we say on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, the Nisan Tokef, Rosh Hashanah Yekasevun, Uviyom Tzom Kippur Yechasemun. On Rosh Hashanah it is inscribed, and on Yom Kippur it is sealed. And I don't know anybody that I would categorize as being completely evil, without any redeeming qualities, and I don't know anybody who I would describe as being completely righteous without ever having or ever making any missteps. So therefore, we're all Beinoniyim. We're all somewhere in the middle. And that's why we're all involved in this Yom Kippur, Rosh Hashanah to Yom Kippur. But then comes Rashi. And Rashi, of course, is the classic explainer. He is Rashi, Reish Shin Yud, Rabbi Shlomo Yitzchaki. Reish, Rabbi Shin Shlomo Yud Yitzchaki, also known as, by the acronym Rashi, as Rabban Shel Yisroel. He is our teacher. A person learns Chumash, can't learn Chumash without Rashi. A person learns Gemara, you can't learn Gemara without Rashi. You want to learn Navi, you want to learn Ketuvim. Thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people learn Rashi, his teachings on a daily basis. Rashi throws a monkey wrench into the works here. He explains Beinoniyim. Who are the Beinoniyim? Mechza al mechza. A photo finish. Perfectly in balance between the good and the bad, a perfect balance. That's Beinoniyim. That's the middle ones. That's the in-between. Which means a Rasha is someone who has more bad than good. If it's not a photo finish, exact dead heat equal, more Ra, that's a Rasha Gamor. More Tov, more good, that's a Tzaddik Gamor. That's completely righteous. But then we run into a serious problem. The serious problem is we look around the world today, and there are plenty of people who we would say, there's no one who I would say is completely bad. But there are some people who are pretty close to that. I mean, you talk about an Assad in Syria. You talk about people who are, wantonly destroying lives left and right. And yet they seem to make it year to year. I used to have Saddam Hussein and Gaddafi on that list, and they reached the point where they didn't make it past. But unfortunately, there's still many in the world who will be hard for us to see them as either more good than bad or perfect balance, and yet they seem to carry on. Right? We talk about them; they're still here next Rosh Hashanah and the Rosh Hashanah afterwards. So, how are we meant to understand this judgment? So important to keep in mind source number 4, which is the Rambam, Maimonides, as could have been guessed in his Hilchot Teshuvah, in his laws of repentance. He says as follows: Shikul zeh, this weighing, English, this reckoning, fair enough, but a mishkal is a weight. This shikul, this weighing of the good versus the bad, and that which we said, a dead heat, it's not according to it's not a numbers game. All right, how many brachot did I make? How much chesed, how much tzedakah did I give? Godalam, but according to their size, their magnitude. What does that mean? And he goes further and he explains, Yesh zechut, there's a merit, shehi keneged kama avonot, which can outweigh many sins, many missteps. And he brings a pasuk from Malachim, from Kings. And v'yesh avon she keneged kama zechuyot. There's certain sins that can outweigh a number of mitzvot. And brings the pasuk from Kohelet. So how does it get weighed? How are we supposed to weigh it? That's the answer. You and I, we are not supposed to weigh it. Ein shoklin ela bedato shalkel deot. This shikul, this assessment, this weighing could only be done according to the understanding of the kel deot, of the God of all knowledge. Fuhu hayodeya, he and only he knows. How do we arrange, how do we understand this weighing of the good versus the bad? Right? We have no way of really knowing how much this person's mitzvah might be worth, how much that Aveira might be worth. And therefore, we cannot possibly judge. I think I mentioned last week, I think it was in this class, I'm not sure if in Lunch&Learn, where we mentioned that, who's here? Let's see, Alan was with us when we went to Israel, Poland, Israel. And we, in the cemetery in Krakow, I think it was, we saw the gravesite of Yankala the miser. Yankala the miser, Yankala the miser. His stone said Yankala the miser. Who's Yankala the miser? So it was a very, very wealthy person who lived in the town and refused to give money to any tzedakah. Refused. And he was denigrated. He walked in the streets, kids would throw pebbles at him. Yankala the miser, Yankala the miser. Not only wouldn't he give any tzedakah, but he would call in people who were in need and hear their whole story. They would raise their hopes that, he's finally going to open up and help a little bit. And then he'd kick them out without giving them a penny. And he was scorned, and as he's nearing the end of his life, the Chevra Kadisha approached him and said, now's your chance. You can't take it with you to the grave. Now's your chance. Give your tzedakah. And he said, I'm not going to give a cent. And they said, if you don't give anything, we're not going to bury you in the Jewish cemetery. And he said, so don't bury me in the Jewish cemetery. I'm not going to give you a cent. Yankala, you can't take it with you. Don't bother me. Leave me alone. And Yankala died without writing a check, without giving a cent to tzedakah. And the Chevra Kadisha buried him outside, right outside the fence of the Jewish cemetery. So you ask, Rabbi Ciner, you just said that on the Poland trip he was there in the Jewish cemetery in Krakow. Well, the story continued. And that Friday, all of a sudden, the Rav of the city is swamped with people coming to him. They need this, they need that, they need this, they need that. And he says, I don't understand. How did you manage until now? And they said, well, the baker said, well, right before, on Friday, an envelope would come under my door with money to help me be able to give out all these loaves to the poor people. As did an envelope arrive by the butcher, as did an envelope arrive by the supermarket, as did envelopes arrive under the doors of so many people. And this week there was no envelope. So the whole city came to the Rav for help to use the rabbi's discretionary account. And it became very apparent that this Yankala, the miser, was no miser at all. And he was the one who was supporting and keeping the whole town afloat. And doing it in a secretive manner, and not only not getting honor, but getting scorn for not doing what he actually was doing. And he did not want any honor, he did not want any respect here, he just wanted to do the right thing. And the Rav said, move the kever, move the gravesite into the Jewish cemetery, and I want him to be buried right next to the spot that's been reserved for me. So we don't know who a person is. We don't know what a person is really up to. And it goes in all directions. And even if we see the actions that a person is doing, we have no way of knowing how difficult it might have been for that person and how this is being measured. And therefore, as the Rambam says, only the Kel Deot, only the God of knowledge, can understand and assess it. Tosfot, though, goes off in a different angle. So that Rambam is very, very important. Right? We don't know how we're being assessed. We certainly can't know how anyone else is being assessed. And therefore, what we need to do is grab every moment, grab every opportunity, and try to make it. And as meaningful, as powerful, as impactful as we can. I just had in the Gemara Sanhedrin, we're learning that in the morning after davening. And it said that the tzedakah we give is measured according to the chesed shebo. The tzedakah, the charity we give, is measured according to the chesed, the kindness that's involved. How do we make the person feel when they're getting it? How do we do it? Do we do it b'sever panim yafot with a warm, generous approach? Or is it, here, take this? The Gemara Kedushin tells a story that you could have a person who makes his father work in a mill, grinding the flour, and will receive the world heaven for that. And you can have a person who feeds his father the best fatted fowl, before we knew how bad fatted fowl was for us. But he fed his father the best meals, and to be held accountable. The Gemara explains two actual stories that took place. One story is a person was a hardworking young man with a wife and children, and his father and he worked in a mill, and his father received a summons, received a draft notice to go into the king's army. And his father was an older, weaker man, and he would not have survived going into the army. And therefore this young man said to his father, "Father, take over from me at the mill, feed my wife and children, and I'll go to the army in your stead." So by doing so, he saved his father's life. And that's the person who made his father grind flour in a mill and receives reward for it. Another person was very, very wealthy, and he fed his father the best meals, but his attitude and the way that he conveyed it to his father, the Gemara describes as echol kelev echol, eat, dog, eat. Right? He was not gracious at all in that which he gave, to his father. And there you have the person who is feeding fatted fowl to his father and be held accountable for it. Yes. Oh, I neglected to say before, and I'll say now, I'll say it again at the end, that today's Lunch and Learn was graciously sponsored by the Lieberman family, Beverly, Warren, and the three daughters, in honor of Monica Faganov, as thanks for her love and dedication that she devoted to the Beth Jacob community, continues to devote, but that she devoted when she was working here in the office so kindly and so tirelessly, and also sponsored by Joel Widzer in honor of his mother, Allah Shalom, Patricia Widzer, Sarah Bat Avraham. So that's how we can't measure. We don't know, we look at something, we don't know the backstory of all the things that are going on, and therefore we can't measure. But what we can do, as I started to say before, is make sure that whatever we are doing, we're doing it in the kindest manner, in the most energized manner, in the best manner, in the most elevated manner that we possibly can. Tosafot in source number 5. Tosafot are the sages, mostly from France and Spain, around the years, probably the years 12, probably the 12th and 13th century, and they have their comments and their explanations on the Gemara, on the Talmud, and it's actually printed in the Gemara itself. Tosafot says, "Midikal choshev beinonim mashmid et tzadikim kar lemisha zechutav merubim, or sharm gemur lemisha avonosav merubim." He said that, as Rashi had said, right, a righteous person is one whose merits are greater, and a wicked person is one whose transgressions are more. Because Beinonim, right, he understands also to mean a photo finish. So if you're not a photo finish towards the bad or towards the good, that will categorize you as such. Sometimes, however, the righteous are sealed for death, and the totally wicked for life. Therefore, the definitions of life and death, he says, refer to life in the world to come. It's talking about the judgment of where a person will be in the world to come. Now, that's clearly problematic and needs to be understood better. Because, as we see in source number 6 from the Sifsei Chaim or Chaim Friedlander, Yesh Lavin, we need to understand this. Sharei din zeh lechai olam haba eino b'Rosh Hashana, ela rak la'acher p'tirat ha'adam b'va'o lifnei beit din shel mala. This world to come judgment is not on Rosh Hashanah, but when a person comes to the heavenly court after his death, his or her death. The Olam Haba is the sum total, the world to come, judgment is the sum total of the life that a person has lived. That's measured after we each take our very last breath. I like to say, not when our heart stops beating, but when it doesn't do its next beat. Our heart stops beating about 60 times a minute, right? But thankfully, it beats another day, right? So the Olam Haba is at the end of a person's life. What is this Rosh Hashanah judgment that's taking place every year in Rosh Hashanah, yet it's determining, or it's based upon, a person's olam haba, a person's world to come. It's premature. All data has not yet been entered. And why would it be at this point? It seems to not make sense. And in source number 7, he explains with a very, very profound and important concept. And he writes, I'll take it in English. The establishment of one's spiritual essence for the coming year is the judgment on Rosh Hashanah that relates to the world to come. Oh, so it relates to the world to come, but it's not a ruling of where will this person be after 120 years. But based on where this person at this point is going to be after 120 years, that will impact the judgment of what will happen during the Jewish year 5782, Haba Aleinu Litova, that it should come to us for the good. How do we understand this? This is similar to the statement of the sages found in many places. Who is Ezuhu ben Olam Haba? Who is a ben Olam Haba? A ben Olam Haba means a child of Olam Haba, who is destined for the world to come. It's not simply saying who's a person that after 120 years is destined to come to Olam Haba, but rather Ela she'achshav hu kfar ben Olam Haba. Right now in his lifetime, he is considered as one destined for the world to come, meaning, as we'll soon see a little further in the next paragraph, the events that will unfold for that person over the course of the year are aligned with where this person is heading. They are aligned with this person being a ben olam haba, meaning his very essence is considered as destined for the world to come, even though he is still alive and kicking in this world. For he is viewed as being rooted in the spiritual world. When he's living, or he or she are living their life here, they are rooted, their base is in a spiritual world, which is considered to be the world to come. In this way, a person's judgment is related to the world to come, for on Rosh Hashanah, a person's spiritual essence is established according to his level. That is to say, that he writes, he inscribes his own book. We decide which book are we being written in. Am I think of Noach Weinberg, the legendary founder of Eshad Torah. You ask people, do you believe you have a soul? A person would say, yeah, Rabbi, I believe I have a soul. He said, I don't believe I have a soul. Rabbi, you don't believe you have a soul? No, I believe my soul has a body. I believe my soul has a body. Who am I? What am I? Am I a body? And then there is this extraneous aspect, this rider, this add-on that is my soul? Or am I a ben olam haba? Am I a person who's living in a spiritual world, who sees God's blessings wherever I look? And I see God's providence wherever I look. I just mentioned to two people earlier today, I was in the shul kitchen. We have a box there of ice cream sandwiches that were left over from Ray's generosity from Shavuot time. And they're just sitting there in the freezer. I've been learning with the bar mitzvah boy. So after each time I learn with him, I give him one of those. And then I saw it's starting to get low. I might need to replace the box. And then I looked at the calendar and I saw how many times he's going to be bar mitzvah in Sukkot time. I saw how many more times am I going to learn with him. And I counted up how many more ice cream sandwiches there were. And wouldn't you know, it was an exact number. And I started giving him these ice creams months ago when I started with him. So are we living in God's world, in God's hands, in a spiritual, incredible place? And of course we have a body, and we have to tend to the body. We have to feed the body. We have to exercise the body. We have to keep the body healthy. And we also have to keep our emotional mind and self healthy, which means taking some time off, which means exercising, which means, I'm not saying that we're living on a mountaintop, but what, am I a ben olam haba or am I a ben olam hazeh? That is to say, he inscribes his own book. A person's spiritual essence is established according to his and her level. What world am I choosing to live in? And the establishment of the individual's spiritual level on Rosh Hashana determines the corresponding judgment in his personal sustenance, such as health, income, etc. Depending where I am, where I'm rooted, which book I have inscribed myself in, that will determine what is best for me for this forthcoming year, in terms of health, in terms of income, in terms of all the things that concern us, in terms of all that which will unfold over the course of the year. If I am a ben olam haba, then it might follow that I'm going to need to have some difficulties this year. Could be. In order to help clear the way for my olam haba, there might be some accounting that needs to be done for some things that I've done. On the other hand, if I'm a ben olam haba, it could be God's going to give me everything so smoothly and easily, to not interfere with my becoming a ben olam haba, to not interfere, right? We never know. We never know what's coming our way. Why is it coming our way? What we do believe and understand is it's coming from God for a reason. It's lovingly coming from God with a reason, for a reason. But we have to take into account the entire person. You know, if a person is running a marathon, if they are 100 yards from the end, they don't need to conserve that much in their water bottle. Drink as much as you want. If a person has another 3-4 miles, they need to conserve. Depending where we're going and where we are, which only God knows, that will determine what is best for us along the way as we are making our way in that direction. And Rosh Hashana is the pivotal point for that judgment that we give to ourselves. And this we'll see from a number of few more sources. Famously, we hear about Yishmael. Yishmael, who was banished along with his mother Hagar. And then they are thirsty out in the desert. The pasuk there says the child grew and was weaned, and Avraham made a large feast on the day that Yitzchak was weaned, and Sarah saw Yishmael, the son of Hagar the Egyptian, whom she had borne to Avraham, was mocking. She said to Avraham, "Send out this maidservant and her son." The idea was very evil in Avram's eyes on account of his son, but God spoke to Avram and said, "That which Sarah said about the boy and the maidservant should not be evil in your eyes. All that Sarah says to you, listen to her voice. For through Yitzchak shall your seed be called." And Avram woke early in the morning and took bread and a skin of water, right? A node, a canteen of water, and gave it to Hagar and sent her away with Yishmael. And she went and wandered in the desert of Beersheba, and the water was finished from the skin. And she cast the boy under one of the trees. She went and sat down at a distance of a bow shot from the tree, for she said, "I did not want to see the death of the child." Many point out over here, this is a particularly non-Jewish approach. Abraham, on the way to the Akedah, as difficult as that was, and sensing the impending doom, nevertheless, he was there with Yitzchak every moment, comforting and embracing. I do not want to see the death of the child. To me, that has a very selfish ring to it. You don't want to see it. But wouldn't the child feel more comforted being in your arms? She sat opposite him and raised her voice and wept. God heard the voice of the boy. It doesn't say God heard her voice. She was being somewhat callous, concerned about her own self and not the boy. God heard the voice of the child, of the boy. And an angel of God called to Hagar from the heavens and said, "What is troubling you, Hagar? Do not be afraid, for God has heeded the voice. Shema Elokim el kol hanar ba'asher hu sham." God has heeded the voice of the child in his present state. What is the emphasis of in his present state? So the Gemara and Rashi, let's look at number 2. The Gemara says, Rabbi Yitzchak said, a person is judged according to their actions at that moment, at that point. As it says, Hashem heard the voice of the lad as he was in his present state. And as Rashi explains, meaning source number 3, he is judged according to the action that he's doing now, not what the future will hold. What was going on in the heavens? What was this whole tumult in the heavens? The angels accused Yishmael, saying, "Master of the world, how can you provide a well of water for someone whose descendants will kill your children in the future through thirst?" Meaning, as we left Egypt, we passed through there, we asked them for water. They came out with salty food and then these empty flasks. And many of us died through this thirst. They were his descendants. So the angel said, "You're providing water in the desert for the one whose descendants will cause your children to die through thirst in the very same desert." And Hashem answered, "Achshav Mahu." Right now. What is he? Who is he? What is his status? Tzaddik or Rasha? Righteous or otherwise? Amrullah, they said Tzaddik. Right now he's righteous. Amr lahem lefi ma'asav shel achshav ani dano. I am judging him according to his actions of now, today, this moment. As it says, v'zehu ba'asher hu sham. Exactly where he is. And Rabbi Victor Nebenzal, source number 4, we find one of the major foundations of Teshuvah in God's reply to the angel's question, which our sages most certainly wanted us to consider at the time of the Torah reading. The sages wanted to teach us the principle of in his present state. We read about this on Rosh Hashanah. Why? Why did our sages institute this to be part of our Torah reading on Rosh Hashanah? Because he wanted us to consider this, to teach us this principle of Ba'asher Hu Sham, in the present state. Even if one's deeds are not of the highest caliber, during the rest of the year, one should make every attempt to improve one's ways during the days preceding the Day of Judgment, Rosh Hashanah, in order to receive a favorable verdict. This is so, even if one suspects that he's likely to stumble after Rosh Hashanah and not remain on the same spiritual level. A person is judged ba'asher hu sham, in the present state, not according to the future actions. Therefore, if a person raises his spiritual level to a higher than normal plane on Rosh Hashanah, that person will receive a favorable judgment. So it's not just simply putting ourselves into that book. It's deciding minimally on that day, and the preparation leading up to it certainly is crucially important towards successfully being there on that day. But on that day, deciding this is who I am. I am a Ben Olam Haba. I am a soul with a body. I am not a body with a soul. And actually, this is brought down in Jewish law, in the Shulchan Aruch, in our code of Jewish law. And there, Rav Yosef Karo, the Mechaber, the author of Shulchan Aruch, writes, Af mi she'eno nizhar mipat shel kutim ba'aseret yemei teshuvah tzarich lizaher. Even someone who's not normally so scrupulous, but not eating bread baked by a non-Jew, should be scrupulous during the 10 days of Teshuvah. And this is not simply when it comes to that idea, which is a chumrah, stringency, that many people adopt and many people don't. But what it means is each person needs to look at themselves and say, what can I do to upgrade even just during these 10 days? Even if I know I will not remain with that stringency afterwards. Let's understand that a little bit. Let's see source number 6, and I'll share another thought with you also. What's the value? Or am I fooling God? What's the value in taking this on for a few days before Rosh Hashanah? For the days stretching from Rosh Hashanah until Yom Kippur? What's the value if I know and God knows that comes the 11th of Tishrei, comes the day after Yom Kippur? I'm not going to be doing that anymore. I'm going back to my old ways. So what's the value? Am I fooling God? So the Jerusalem Talmud writes, Rabbi Chia instructed Rav, if you're able to eat in a state of purity all year, then do so. But if not, then at least do so for those 7 days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. From here, Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair derived the following. Zerizut, alacrity, zeal, leads to nikiyut, to cleanliness. Cleanliness, mevia lidei tara, leads to purity. This might sound familiar. This is the teaching about which the classic Jewish Musar, ethics book, Mesilat Yesharim, the Path of the Just, is built on this Breita. One thing leads to another. And therefore, even if you have no intention of continuing afterwards, you never know. You never know. Once you start, you might. That's one level. But according to that, if we'll just leave it at that, very good, I might. But if I didn't, I might. But let's say I know I'm a month after, and guess what? I didn't. Granted, I might have, but I didn't. So does that then undermine and take away the value of those 10 days? And it doesn't. Because we have the concept that we say, Dirshu Hashem bihimatzo karauhu bioto karov. Seek out God when he could be found. Call out, call out to him when he is nearby. And that is a reference, our sages teach us, to these days of Rosh Hashana through Yom Kippur. And that's a time where, as the Hasidic way of framing it, is the king is in the field. God comes to us. God's presence comes and joins us. So just like, as I said before, if a great rabbi would come to your house and you would put away certain things, or even though you normally listen to certain music, you might not blast that music when this person is visiting. And that's not being a hypocrite. That is showing deference, showing respect to the presence of this esteemed person. So too, if and when we raise our game, we raise the bar a little bit during this Aseret Yemei Teshuvah, during the days leading up to Rosh Hashanah through Yom Kippur, even though it doesn't mean I'm not going to listen to that music anymore, but I'm not going to blast it when this great rabbi is visiting me. It's a show of respect. It's a show of deference. So even if we will revert back, even if we do end up reverting back, that does not take away from the importance and the value that we did raise the bar during that period of time, because Melech Basadeh, the king was in the field. The king had come to visit. Hashem was himatzo, was bioto karov. And therefore, out of respect to this heightened presence of God that exists during these days, I showed respect. I showed deference. I raised my game. I raised the bar. And even if it comes back down afterwards, that does not take away from that value. So the judgment is not necessarily who will live and who will die that year. Is this person a person who is destined for eternal life or not? And that will determine that which will unfold over the course of the year. So yes, a Saddam Hussein might have survived many years with incredible wealth and opulence, but we all know the end that he received. And perhaps, God only knows how to judge, but perhaps all the wealth and opulence and power that he had was as his payment for the few good deeds that he did. And that way, when he gets to the next world, the account has been emptied of any merit. Who's to know? But we have righteous people who die. We have evil people who live. That's not what the judgment is. The judgment is that person a ben olam haba? And that will then dictate that which will unfold. And we decide if we're the ben olam haba. We decide what world are we living in. Am I a body with a soul? Am I a soul with a body? Am I living in this world and I let God in once in a while, or am I living in God's world? And I make sure of course, to take care of my physical self also, because that's what I've been entrusted with. And the pivotal point is on Rosh Hashanah. Ba'asher hu sham. Exactly as we are at that moment. And therefore, we are instructed by Rabbi Yosef Karo, the Shulchan Aruch, to raise the bar. Not the way he says to raise it. He's talking to whom he is speaking to, and we're speaking to ourselves. And everyone knows if that means keeping kosher, if that means a higher level of kosher, if that means davening, if that means a better concentration, if that means kindness, if it means more kindness, if it means a blessing, if it means more, everyone knows. Everyone knows what's the area that they can raise up. This crucial ba'asher hu sham, as we are there during this crucial time of that which will unfold. And certainly in the COVID world that we are living in, as I always say, our false sense of security has been shaken, right? We never had any real security. We're always in God's hands. But we had a false sense of security going for a long time before this pandemic. But at this point, our false sense of security has been shaken. And that's why I think we go into Rosh Hashanah this year, last year, with a slightly different mindset of the importance of the din, of the judgment, of that which will unfold for us and our families, our community, our dear ones, over the course of this next year. Okay, my friends, we will call it over here. I can't see everybody, so if you want to say something, you're raising your hand. Don't do that. Just unmute. Otherwise, I will bid you all a good day. We will be streaming Kabbalat Shabbat tomorrow starting 6:15, but please do come in person, those of you who can. And this Sunday night, we're showing a documentary outside here with chairs in the parking lot area right in front of the shul where we traditionally have built our sukkah. And it's a documentary about an all-women Hasidic ambulance service and the hurdles that they had to cross in order to institute this. Very, very fascinating documentary. That's Sunday night. I believe we're showing it at 7:15 or 7:30. I think 7:30. And so please do RSVP, sign up for that. And let me wish everybody a good Shabbos and a Shavuot, the rest of Shavuot Tov, and look forward to seeing you soon. Okay. Be well, everybody. Be well. Alan, Cheryl, Steve, Rosa. That's who I see. Okay, my friends. You're very, very welcome. Oh, and Lenora on the phone. Yes, Lenora. Good. Your name is emblazoned right there.